Well, hi, everybody. This is Becky Freemal with WFXR News and, of course, with Virginia at Work every Sunday night. With me, Lynda McNutt Foster with Cortex Leadership Consulting, and David Emerald joining us via Skype from Seattle, Washington. Welcome, David.
Glad to be here, Becky. Thanks.
Thanks for being with us. And Lynda, I'll let you kind of do a little introduction of David because I know you work or teach a lot of his work with companies around our area.
It's a privilege to have David Emerald on. Thank you for being here and taking the time. He's sort of jet setting. So he's one of those overnight success stories. He's been working at this for many, 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 many years. And his work is kind of catching fire. So they've done a team with Google. They've done a lot of deep dives now with Cleveland Clinic. And I really connected with his work in a deep way because I found it to be so practical and started giving keynote speeches called Make Shift Happen based on this dreaded trauma triangle, shifting to the empowerment dynamic. I got to spend 3 days with him and his co-facilitator, Donna, who is also his wife, in Richmond. Right. And just find out of all the work that we do that this constantly comes up. Because whether it's people's personal lives or their business lives, we all experience drama.
So, David, when she says this always comes up, talk about what this is. What is your work? What have you spent all of this time getting across to people?
Well, my background, Becky, is actually in leadership and organization development. And I'm starting there because the power of TED, even though it is a fable and the work is around self-leadership rather than leadership of others. Really came to the conclusion a number of years ago that the way we lead our own lives has everything to do with the quality of leadership we would bring to our organizations or our families or our neighborhoods, et cetera. And I've been at this now for about 35 years in various forms, starting with basic communications, and actually had the good fortune as an undergraduate to be an interpersonal communication teaching assistant. And so I would say that the journey has been evolving for now decades. And so the it is how do we shift from our default and often unconscious ways of relating that can be very drama filled to much more satisfying and empowered ways of relating to one another and to our life experience.
And you authored the book, The Power of TED. Who, and probably more likely what, is TED?
Well, actually, TED is both a who in terms of a character in the book. So let me just say a little bit about the book itself. Yes. The book is a fable. It's a teaching story that takes place over the course of 2 days. There are 3 characters in the book. One is a character named David. No accident there. And David has gone to the beach to reflect on his life experience and has been dealing with some challenges in his life. And he is sitting on a bench overlooking the beach when this mysterious kind of character named Ted, who's the embodiment of the empowerment dynamic. So TED actually stands for the empowerment dynamic. And they engage in a 2-day conversation. The second day, they are joined by Sophia, who is kind of the wise woman and a mentee of TED's, as they talk through the ways of thinking, the ways of relating, and the ways of taking action that make up the frameworks in the power of TED.
And talk, Lynda, if you could, what was it that first attracted you to David's work that made you think, hey, I really need to utilize this in my class?
I realized how I needed it.
Fair enough.
I think any of the tools that we teach, I picked up and went, I can use this immediately. It actually hit me between the eyes, and I went, I'm not a victim. I'm never a victim. Like, I am an empowered woman who has been successful, that works really hard. And then I started going, wait a second. I'd wake up and go, yep, I was kind of a victim there. And wait a second. If I need a kamikaze at 5 o'clock after a stressful day, isn't that a rescue? Right. So anytime I'm in this space of hoping or wishing someone, anything to rescue me from my current state of being, then I'm being a victim. And I realized I persecuted myself. Like I had a big old bat that I would hit over top of my own self every time I would do something wrong. So I think that I needed it. I used it. I found an immediate way to relate to it, and so did everybody else I shared it with.
Well, Lynda, if I can, you're making a subtle but to me very important point, which is we typically talk about the drama triangle and the empowerment dynamic in terms of interpersonal, relating to other people, but we can have that drama triangle totally within ourselves, where we do become our own worst persecutor, and we feel victimized by our habits or our behaviors or whatever's going on in our lives, and we look for a rescuer. So all of that can take place internally as well as between people.
And let's back up a little bit too. David, I'll let you explain what the drama triangle is. I have the little cheat sheet in front of me with the rescuer, persecutor, and victim, but maybe go over exactly what that all is.
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that the drama triangle was first articulated and kind of put down on paper by Dr. Stephen Cartman, who's a psychiatrist and was an early student of transactional analysis. And the drama triangle, and then I have renamed it with his permission, the dreaded drama triangle, or DDT, because of the toxic nature of the interplay between the roles of victim, persecutor, and rescuer. And the reality is that we all play all three roles, and we can change between those roles in a nanosecond. But those are the roles. So the central role really is the role of a victim. But in order to be a victim, one must have a persecutor. And even though Dr. Cartman articulated the drama triangle in terms of interpersonal dynamics, what I've come to see is that the persecutor does not have to be a person. It could be a condition. It could be a health condition. I've also written co-authored a book on applying the power of TED, for instance, to diabetes. And the persecutor could be a situation, a natural disaster, a tornado, and anything that dominates the time and attention of the victim. And then the third role that completes the triangle is the rescuer. And here too, Lynda was kind of alluding to this, is the rescuer does not have to be a person. It can be anything that helps the victim either numb out from or distance themselves from their sense of powerlessness and hopelessness that are so much a part of being in that victim space.
And Lynda, again, as we said, with Cortex Leadership Consulting, you have worked with corporations and CEOs all around this area. What have you seen when you work with these companies and these CEOs and these leaders about how do you know when your staff is in the grips of this drama triangle?
They talk about it in terms of we're having communication issues. Wow, what's really interesting is they'll say we're missing deadlines. Gosh, these two people just don't seem to be able to work together. Nobody's coming up with, here's a big one that's an indication of the drama triangle. No one seems to come up with ideas anymore. I ask for ideas and it's crickets. I talk in my meeting and I want feedback, but nobody says anything. Right? And so that's the way it presents. Mm-hmm. That's how they come in and talk about it. But those are all, I think, indications of drama.
I'll let you go.
Well, and if I can add to that, Lynda, I think what also happens is that we go into those conversations with leaders, and what we hear is a litany of problems they're dealing with. Problems of, I won't reiterate the list that you just went through. But one other statistic I'll share with you that I know that you run into is that it's currently estimated that managers, leaders spend at least 40% of their time dealing with drama in the workplace. Wow. And some of that can be very overt and some of it can be very subtle. But dealing with employee issues, performance issues, missing deadlines, like you said, are all indications of that problem reactive mindset that the dreaded drama triangle exists within.
Well, I think Well, yeah, and I was thinking that it's the most important thing is that when you and your team are in a constant reactive mode. Mm-hmm. So if you've done any Stephen Covey work with the Eisenhower model with quadrant 1, which is urgent and important, if everything seems like it's urgent and important, you're in a reactive space, and the reactive space is the dreaded drama triangle.
Got it.
You got it.
So tell me, and Lynda, I'll ask you this: when you're working with these people, is there one rule, persecutor, victim, rescuer, that it's harder to realize that you've fallen the trap in? Like, hey, this is what I am. This is who I am in this whole dreaded triangle.
It's interesting you would ask that because I train so many leaders, there is an instant diagnosis of I live in the rescuer mode. Everybody comes into my office. I try to rescue them. I do more doing than I do leading. That's where I'm comfortable. I'm telling you, it's very few people in classes will raise their hand and go, I'm living in victim space.
Right.
That is not something, it takes a minute to really own that. Because the rescuer sounds heroic.
Well, it's more socially acceptable.
That feels good.
Yeah, exactly.
Victim seems powerless. Leaders aren't going to say, I feel like a victim. I think that's why it was such a realization for me when it hit me upside the head. I was like, that sounds weak to me, and I'm not weak. Right. I'm strong. And I went, no, I probably could be a little stronger if I could make the shift.
Right.
What do you see, David, when in putting this together and the power of TED, when people start to get it, that, hey, I guess I am the victim, or any of them, but that sounds like the victim being the hardest one. What are their reactions? What's next? What's the next step?
Well, first of all, I'd say that when people, I'll speak about my own experience, that when I first heard about the Cartman drama triangle, as I was going through some challenging times in my life, and first heard about the triangle, it was what I call a blinding flash of the obvious. in that, you've experienced a BFO when there's that part of you that goes, oh, I knew this, but it described, for me, it described a dynamic that was just on the edge of my awareness, and it gave me the language to identify it. What then happens, to answer your question, Becky, is that once we can identify and start to see the roles playing out in our lives and in our relationships, then the next question is, well, how do I get off the triangle? How do I move to a more empowered way of relating? And unfortunately, and Dr. Cartman actually shared this with me, is that basically until I was blessed with the insight of there being an alternative, that the literature around the drama triangle basically came down to, now that you see it, don't do it no more. Just don't.
Right.
Don't engage in it. And there was not not an escape, not an alternative. And for most of us, it's one thing to have the awareness, but if there's not somewhere else to go, that awareness actually can become even more painful. We could feel victimized by even having the awareness.
All right, I think that would be a great place to wrap up this first session with you and let everybody know that there is a way, there is hope to get out of the drama triangle, and we will discuss that in just a moment. So again, with us, David Emerald with The Power of TED, and Lynda McNutt Foster with Cortex Leadership Consulting, and I, Becky Freemal at WFXR News, will be back with some answers on how to get out of it in just a moment.